Hey everybody, Alex here for Nerdy Inc. coming at you with another episode of Nerd Talk. Today we're devoting our conversation to mothers because it's Mother's Day. And if you didn't know that, then you're just the worst child. Or you're watching this video on a day that is no longer Mother's Day, in which case you're in the clear. So anyway, Steve and I were thinking of a topic to sort of discuss, and we thought about, well, what's something we can sort of tie things back to our moms? And because we talk about video games and put our conversations on the internet, we thought maybe it would be a good way to sort of explain why we like the things we do and why we like video games. So we had a conversation about how to gear video games towards your mothers, or how to sort of introduce your mom to some video games that you may like, or some styles of video games you may like. If you're hoping to get sort of your friends or your dad or your weird uncle into video games, this conversation does not apply. It only works to mothers. No, obviously this conversation sort of works for pretty much any person that has no understanding of video games. So, if your dad wants to get into video games and he doesn't know where to start, this conversation still works. But we sort of talked about it in the context of our mothers, the people who raised us, because where would we be without them, right? We'd probably still be not alive. I will be back at the end for one little footnote because I did misspeak at one point, and I want to just give you guys a correction so you know I'm not a complete idiot. But without further ado, here is our conversation. So, we are joined today by my usual co-host, Steve.
Hello, this is Steve for Nerdy Inc.
And we are also joined in spirit by our mothers. We are everyone's mother. We are devoting this episode to our mothers and basically anyone who's hoping to get into some sorts of video games and doesn't really know what types of video games are for them or where to start.
With your mothers.
With your mother. Yes. So, basically, Steve, if you want to start off this one, since this conversation was your idea, this Mother's Day themed nerd talk.
Sure. So, a game that, is light and easy to get into that mothers would enjoy, it's family friendly, would be Rayman Origins. And I'm going to start with, I'm picking Rayman Origins as opposed to Legends because if I play Legends, I feel like they introduce all the mechanics all at once, which is something that might be overwhelming for, we're talking about mothers as people who may not play video games, but, hey, next generation, they will probably already be familiar. So this is for our mothers. But Rayman Origins introduces everything on a really simple, builds mechanics on top of each other. It's a real simple, light platformer. Everything has googly eyes, so it's funny. And the co-op is big too because you get the kids to play and it's, help them out and stuff like that. So I'm a huge fan of Rayman Origins. I don't know, it's kind of cheesy though too. And I feel like my mother doesn't like cheesy things. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I've known my mom for 23 years and I still to this day have no idea what taste she has. Because she will come out of left field saying she loves this one thing and I'll be like, what are you talking about? You should like this thing. So I don't know what my mom likes.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I feel like most people, mothers or otherwise, Rayman Origins is a good place to get into games. But then there's like the way they talk, they've got these weird baby voice things or whatever, and there's weird musical stuff that I feel like if they saw me playing it, they'd be like, what are you playing? This, you're not 5 years old anymore. I'll say I'm always 5 years old when I play video games.
So just to clarify for all the mothers out there listening to us, we have a big mother listening base. That's a platformer, right?
Yes, sorry. It's a 2D platformer too. So you're only going left and right and you're jumping. That's pretty much it.
Cool.
And you get, different abilities as you go on. But I think the co-op thing is a big part of it too cuz your mother doesn't have to carry the game. She can go along for the ride.
So I guess sort of in a similar vein to that, but just a little bit different if we want to get into some RPG elements, I would always recommend Paper Mario, the original N64 Paper Mario. That is one of my all-time favorite games just in general. It's always been some of the game that I just go back to play just if I'm bored or just want to go for some nostalgia factor. I like it a lot, but it's a great introduction into sort of RPG style gameplay because, as we know, RPGs basically say you need to level up skills, you need to level up this or that in order to sort of develop your character and take a different, explore some of the different avenues you could take in the game. Paper Mario does that on a very, very limited scale. Basically, you can level up one of three things every once in a while. You can level up your health, which is your HP. Basically, you can take more damage. You can level up your FP, which gives you the ability to do more skills in battle, do more special moves when you're in a battle. So if you want to do a powerful jump or swing your hammer a little bit harder, you can just use FP, and the more FP you have, the more times you can do that in a battle. And finally, you can upgrade your BP, which is your badge power. Badges are something you can put on to give yourself new abilities. So if you don't want to take new abilities, if you just want to just sort of do the baseline attacks, jumping, hammering, and using items, you want to upgrade all your health because that way you can be safe in battle. If you think that you can do a lot of really cool timed attacks, then you want to upgrade a whole bunch of your FP and your BP in order to give yourself new attacks, and you sort of want to weigh one against the other. So that is a great way to sort of learn sort of the decision making and sort of the different avenues you can explore when you're playing an RPG. However, it doesn't bog you down with knowing that there are hundreds of different things you can level up in any different way. Like if you look at Skyrim, and you can the amount of things you can level up in Skyrim would be very overwhelming if Skyrim was the first video game you ever played. So that's one of the great things about Paper Mario. In addition to, it is also a turn-based battle system game. So every battle you go into, you can sort of take your time and think about what is the right move here. You don't have to worry about mashing as many buttons as possible or countering or doing anything. You can just sort of think, what's the smart way to move here? What's the best sort of play when I'm going through this battle? In addition to the fact, it's also a fun game. It's a very happy game. It's very typical Mario. You go to a lot of different cool places. It's a really fun adventure. So Paper Mario is my recommendation if you want to get into some sort of RPG style games.
That was for GameCube, right?
And 64. They made a
sequel
sequel to the GameCube called Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door.
Thousand Year Door, that's right.
And then they made maybe two. They made, I think, two sequels. One called Super Paper Mario, which was Paper Mario visual mixed with the actual gameplay of the original Mario games. So side-scrolling platformer. And then they made another one called Sticker Star, which is I want to say it was for the 3DS, which I don't have. I've never played that one, so I can't speak to that one. But the first one is great. The second one is very good. So both solid recommendations.
Well, I'm going to swing in the complete opposite direction now and talk about gritty games.
Go for it.
Because who doesn't like a gritty game?
Yeah.
Well, mothers, maybe. But no, I think The Last of Us, which is the polar opposite of Paper Mario. If somebody is looking to get into a game that sort of displays video games as more of an evolving medium and art form and closer to film, if that's what they're about, I think there's a lot to really like there because, yeah, it's like violent or whatever, but it's never glorifying violence like, your Grand Theft Autos and stuff like that. The writing is impeccable. It knows how to tell a story over the course of a long period of time. There are multiple, acts, I guess you could say, that feel really important. So it's not like it's a typical action game that just drags you on for 10 hours and then finishes. There's actually stuff that happens in the middle. And I had another point that is now going to have to be.
What's the gameplay like?
It's third-person action cover-based, sort of. So, it's more action-heavy. Everything feels like it has a lot of weight to it. Like, it feels very realistic. So, yeah, I mean, it's, stereotype that moms don't like violence, or whatever. But, like, if they're a fan of good movies or, like Game of Thrones or something like that, then it's just, like, right up their alley. You got good, father-daughter relationships, and the acting, that's the other thing I want to talk about. It's really good. All the motion cap stuff and the voice acting and delivery is all super believable. So if there's ever a video game that would elevate games from the level of, like, this is just for kids to, oh, okay, this is also for adults, and not just regular adults, but like mature adults who like to be told a good narrative and tight gameplay, The Last of Us is the place to go.
It's funny that you mentioned Game of Thrones because that's the direction I want to take. I think another good way, if you want to introduce storytelling, very in-depth storytelling, very heavy narrative, but your mom may not have the sort of hand-eye coordination that would be required to go through a very action-heavy game. The Telltale games are obviously a great choice. I'm currently playing through right now just the Game of Thrones as it comes out, and that's a great, great, great storytelling game. Game of Thrones, I know my mom, she reads all the books, she watches the show, so she's very into Game of Thrones. That'd be a great game for her. But I know if maybe your mom loves zombies, Wolf Among Us and Tales from the Borderlands, I feel like are a little bit more niche of an audience. They don't have sort of the mass appeal that Game of Thrones and Walking Dead currently have.
See, I would actually interrupt you for a sec to disagree. I would agree about Borderlands because that's sort of video game specific, but The Wolf Among Us, like, I know, like, Once Upon a Time is, like, a super popular thing, which is sort of a mashup of fantasy stuff. The Wolf Among Us is like that, just more mature, I think, which just means they use harsher language more often. But, and is also based on comic books that I know my mother read and sort of enjoyed, I believe. So, I think The Wolf Among Us is pretty good to check out, too. But, continue. Game of Thrones.
I agree with you, right, in that fact that it's not a bad storytelling. It's not something that moms would necessarily hate. It's just Game of Thrones and Walking Dead are a little bit more in the ethos right now.
Way more pop culture.
Yeah, so
savvy.
If your mom has read the Fables comics or is into that sort of thing, definitely, that's a good recommendation. But I feel like, just speaking from my mom's perspective, I know most people have at least heard of Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, and a lot of people are into it given their ratings. So those are definitely things that I think are a little bit more accessible if your mom isn't fully into some of that stuff. But if your mom read Fables, I know, like you just said, then it's not to discount Fables at all, or Wolf Among Us. But those are definitely games to check out if you want to sort of showcase the storytelling that can exist in a video game, especially since you sort of dictate things in the story. Obviously the main, sort of the main skeleton is still there, but some of the inner details inside the game is definitely a good way to showcase sort of the way you can sort of determine the story of a video game.
I think they also require less convincing as well because of your, like you said, the aforementioned fan base that's already built up around it and familiarity. So it's like, oh, I know who that is, or it's not completely new characters.
Right. And so then the last one that I do want to discuss is this is one that I always like to recommend to pretty much anyone as a great video game to play is good old Portal. And that's just because Portal is a great sort of introduction into actual very heavy gameplay, because Portal does eventually become a very demanding game in terms of skill and sort of timing and sort of making decisions, split second action. Basically, it's a very reflexive game, but it's very clear, and like you said with sort of Rain Man, it builds up, bit by bit. It introduces a new element slowly and very clearly, but it's also a very thought-provoking game in terms of it just requires you to be good at thinking and problem solving and puzzle doing, I guess. And that's always a great game mixed with its humor. It's a great way to just showcase this is what video games at their peak really could be when it comes to sort of introducing memorable characters, interesting gameplay, and just a really unique experience.
I would agree with that choice, actually, wholeheartedly. I think to begin with, for anybody looking to get into video games, but it's almost like just a fleshed out, expansive version of some of the old school stuff that I know, like, my mother grew up on, like Tetris and Pac-Man and some of the more arcadey stuff, but still kind of puzzly, like, obviously Pac-Man requires a lot of hand-eye coordination stuff, and I know my mother really likes it, and she likes the puzzle-solving Tetris stuff because she likes making progress and clearing lines and stuff like that. So I think Portal is actually probably the perfect choice, and it's funny.
Exactly, that's another. It's such a unique experience to be thinking and doing all this heavy problem solving, but still laughing every step of the way, but still having an overarching narrative structure that sort of keeps you on edge a little bit of the time. And like I said, it builds up to be a pretty complex game experience, especially if you go into Portal 2, where you're bouncing and sliding and flipping through all these different portals. But it builds up to that gradually enough and clearly enough that I don't think it ever becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely. And the first one's pretty short too, so that's definitely, another plus in the introduction thing, so
Right.
it doesn't feel like it's getting stretched out.
To say that there's only 9 levels that can take you anywhere from a minute to finish a puzzle to 20 minutes, and so it ultimately ends up being, wow, maybe 3 hours on your first run through. That's a pretty low commitment.
Definitely. Well, let's spin this the other direction.
Okay.
What games would you never show your mother in a million years, or would you never want your mother to catch you playing?
Well, the one that I wouldn't necessarily hide anything from my mom, because I love you, Mom. But
Same.
I would have a hard time sort of explaining to her the premise of BioShock, I feel like. To explain, well, you see, I'm in this sunken city, and there are these guys, you see, who are sort of forever embalmed in these diver suits, and it's my job to go around and stop them and these little girls. I have to, murder all these little girls and harvest their organs, and just that's a pretty that's a tough sell, I feel like, to tell my mom that that's a good game to look into. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, and there's a lot to take in with that game, but that's a tough sell, I feel like.
So I feel like I could probably sell BioShock easier than some other games, but I have this problem where like I was watching House of Cards recently, and it's a pretty low key show. Most of the stuff takes place in offices or the occasional restaurant or dark alley or something like that. But the one like my parents always walk in on was the scene where like some guy was in the middle of some violent sexual act, and I get, what are you watching? So I have the same problem with video games sometimes, where I'm always hovering over like the power button to turn my monitor off at the like right second. And the first time I actually I did that was when I was playing the first Witcher. Because, like, yeah, that's definitely a good thing where, like, if you like Game of Thrones, you'd like The Witcher for its, like, plot and stuff like that, and its maturity. But there were also things where, like, every woman you had sex with, the game would go to, like, a card that, like, had a really sexually explicit image on it. It was, like, hand-drawn. It would just sort of, like, pan over the card and kind of linger on it for, like, a minute. And I'm hearing people walk around my house. I'm like, come on, finish. Like, move on. So, yeah, that's definitely one. And then I just finished Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. That sort of had the same thing, because it's like seedy underground stuff. So there were like, S&M clubs and stuff like that I would not want my mother exposed to.
The Wolf Among Us, if I recall, actually had a couple little instances like that as well. So before you tell your mom to play a Telltale game, recognize that I think that kind of stuff is in it. And knowing where the show goes, Game of Thrones, I wouldn't be surprised if the game eventually introduces something like that.
But again, that has the benefit of if you already watch the show and read the books, you already kind of know what to expect, which is, I think, for mothers is sort of different than if they just see an isolated section of something that they're not familiar with and they think that's all the game is,
Right.
And, I mean, for cases like The Witcher 2, when there's, brothels with topless women walking around, that's not necessarily a poor, judgment on their part.
It is funny, just because the obvious answer that everyone always says when it comes to this sort of thing is they always bring up Grand Theft Auto.
Mm-hmm.
And I was visiting one of my friends one time, and he was playing Grand Theft Auto. I think this was San Andreas. And his mother was just basically harping on this game, saying it was just the lowest level of entertainment possibly achieved. And he basically said, "Here, Mom, try it for a little bit." And within 5 minutes, she was murdering everyone on the side of the road. And so power goes straight to your head, and people realize just what sort of these games, why they are the way they are. And they're not meant to teach you to be violent or to murder people, and they're just a way to just to do new things.
Well, a lot of that has to do, Grand Theft Auto, I think, is one of the most misunderstood franchises out there, I think. Because I remember growing up, my mother was the same way. It was, don't play that trash, whatever. And then you get older, and like Grand Theft Auto 4, I think, was the first one I ever actually played. And it's like, wow, like the writing is really good, and everything is just, satire for society. Like, it doesn't really condone anything, even though it kind of does. But, you feel like it's making a point.
But the other thing to notice, too, is that Grand Theft Auto, while it has those, those very violent moments, and it has those abilities to just be a completely just criminally awful person, it's also got a lot of like normal things in there too. Like this most recent one, you could easily. I mean, obviously the main campaign you can't do this, but if you want to goof off in free mode, you can just sit home and invest in the stock market. Like that, just the game just lets you exactly. You could just do anything, and the fact that people like to crash cars and just be crazy people is just saying that it's something you can't do in real life, and this is a new way for you just to do something fun. I don't think there's any. I think enough parents have also on board with this where they don't. I think they realize that that's not teaching or inspiring people to do anything stupid anymore.
You know what bothered me one time? I don't think I ever told you this, but this is sort of tangential. It relates to mothers. I was in GameStop one day just like browsing, and there was like a 10-year-old kid and his mother, and the kid wanted to buy God of War 3. So he gives the game to his mother, and his mother goes up to the counter, and the guy at the desk is doing his job, and it's like, just so you're aware, this game is rated M for mature for like extreme violence, like graphic nudity, extreme sexual content, like all everything in the book that you don't want a 10-year-old playing. This guy is listing, and the mother turns to the kid and is like, did you know this is in here? And the kid's like, yeah. And she turns and she's like, okay. And like hands him the credit card. And I was like, what? No, okay. I don't think that's how it's supposed to work.
I saw something, it was almost the opposite, where, I think I read this online, I didn't personally witness it, where the kid was trying to buy Grand Theft Auto 5, and mom buys the game, and they say, just so you know, this game has extreme violence, graphic sexuality, nudity, alcohol, and drug references, and the mother yells at the employee for saying, how dare you, my son's 10 years old, don't talk about that stuff in front of him.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so.
I drove both my parents nuts playing Bloodborne. Like everything in like I just played Bloodborne in my room as I'm reviewing it or whatever, but everything in Bloodborne screams horrifically, like all the time. Like there isn't a single thing you come across that doesn't have some weird, awful, like nail scraping, howling noise. I actually beat it, and then I went back to play it again, and like my father and mother came into her, and they're like, "Are you still playing this game?" And they'll like go and shut the door. So that really pissed them off. So I would not recommend Bloodborne for the rents.
See, that's funny because I don't live with my parents. I live with my girlfriend, and I wanted to just pick up Legend of Zelda, so I was playing Twilight Princess, which is my favorite Legend of Zelda game, despite I know it's a pretty unpopular opinion because the correct answer is Ocarina of Time.
Well, I've never played a Zelda game, so now they can judge me instead. So you're off the hook.
He'll take the flak for me. I was playing Twilight Princess, and that game, it takes a little while to pick up. At the beginning, you're in this little village, and you have to do a couple, like, sort of menial tasks. And so my girlfriend knows I'm a huge Legend of Zelda fan. I have a Master Sword in my closet. I just have all this Legend of Zelda stuff. And I'm sort of explaining to her, like, what a great game this is, what a serious game it is, how fun it is. And then she walks in at, like, the beginning, and I'm, like, fishing in a pond and giving the fish to, like, a little cat. And I'm, like, jumping around, and, like, there's, like, a little owl that's, like, perched on my arm. And I was like, no, this is a real game. I'm not just... This is not as stupid as you walked in on this 1 30-second part.
Did you play Kingdom Hearts?
I played the first one, yeah.
Okay. Oh, so you didn't play the second one?
No.
You remember the Atlantis or whatever, the Little Mermaid world?
Yep.
In the first one? And, like, it was actually fun. You, like, floated around. Did you hear about what they did with the second one?
No.
It was, like, a stupid sing-songy game thing where, like, they were just singing songs and you had to, like, push buttons to the rhythm. It was, like, a rhythm-based thing, but it was, like, just a really bad...
direction.
It was, like, yeah, it was just really cheesy and really corny. And even my, like, I don't know, it was maybe 13 at the time or whatever, was still like, this is really dumb. And I had, I think it was my father that walked in and he's like, what the hell are you playing? I'm like, no, it's just a part of the game. It's not the whole game. And then it's like, explanation is useless at that point when Sebastian is singing to me. They weren't even songs from the movie. They were made up for the game. They were terrible.
Once the judgment happens, there's no coming back.
I know, there's no yeah. And then all of a sudden, any other, they're just seeing Disney characters run around your screen and Mickey in a black robe, and it's like, video games.
So there you have it. That was our conversation on video games for moms. The one correction I did want to make was I said that Portal had 9 levels and it actually has 19. That's not a big mistake, but it would have been enough to me to be wrong, and I didn't want to be wrong. So that was my one correction, was I said 9 when I meant to say 19. The only real experience that mothers have with video games is they're either yelling at their children to stop playing it, or they're being romanced by 12-year-olds on Call of Duty multiplayer. So give your mom a treat today and go play video games with her, or do something nice for Mother's Day. And on that note, we're gonna be signing off. So if you've enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff is much appreciated, and we will see you next time.